I'm not live streaming because I'd rather be able to. Since she's not using my computer. Can you see? Can you? I know you're behind that. That better?
So Hadley, let me introduce. Okay, you want to start. Good afternoon, everyone. We are about to get started, and I'm going to be introducing Hadley, who's going to be doing our official first for the church, because Jim Bolton did our kickoff last week. So Hadley her lecture will be in the 1840s to the 1850s, drawing from the archives and historical documents in the earlier years. So Hadley, it's all yours. All right.
So yes, I'm going to talk about our origin story and sort of build off of where Jim Bolton ended last weekend. So we'll get started with our origin story, and we'll go back a little bit further than 1840 to start and talk about what parish life was in the 1700s. Scarsdale was one of the smallest populations in Westchester County. Here we are, little number 3. I'm sure you guys are familiar with where we sit. We were one of the 7 districts of the Rye Parish, and a minister from Rye would come and meet with the congregation in Scarsdale about every 2 months. We obviously have some very early clergy quotes here from officiating in our parish. This first one from 1724 about officiating in Amerenik, Scarsdale, and Fox's Meadows. In 1727, we have a note that there were 36 persons in Scarsdale who the parochial tax was levied. And then again in 74, considerable congregation at White, which you're assuming is in White Plains, Scarsdale, above 7 miles west of the parish church, which I also attended once in 2 months. And in 1763, Scarsdale contributed to the rector's tax and poor of the parish for a sum of about 25 pounds. Early on in the 1700s, people in this area, and primarily the Pophams, as well as some of the earlier families of St. James Leslie and Scarsdale, would have attended either St. Paul's in Eastchester or Grace Church in White Plains. I love this picture of Grace Church from a couple years ago. It reminds me of the children's book, The Little House, where everything sort of grows up around it. But you might be more familiar with that bar picture over there on the left. This is where members of the Church of England would have attended services. In 1795, St. Paul's Church in Eastchester was reorganized, and Major William Popham, was chosen as senior warden there. And then Grace Church in White Plains, when it was reorganized in 1824, so they just celebrated their 200th this year, a couple weeks ago. Major Popham connected himself with that parish, and it's assuming that other people in the area did as well, since it was closer. So speaking of the Morrises and the Pophams, so here's a picture of Judge Richard Morris. He was born in present-day Bronx area, graduate of Yale, Chief Justice of the New York Supreme Court. You know, his family has governors, signers of the Declaration. I mean, they come from a big to-do family. His daughter, Mary Morris, is who married Major William Popham in 1783. And there's, you're testing me. And is this all to do with this? Okay. There's been a lot of speculation about Major Popham and Richard Morris not getting along. They never met before they were married, before they married Mary Morris. So there's some tension there. And Jim Bolden actually found a letter, a pretty scathing letter that Major Popham wrote to Judge Morris, sort of saying, you know, you've quoted me wrong on things, and you've said I've done this, but I haven't. Which is very interesting. He just gave that to the Scarsdale Historical Society last week. So hopefully those will be documented and digitized, and we can all have access to those. So in 1876, that's impossible. It was in 1776, sorry. He purchased the Huntsmith House, which is in present-day 221 Old Army Road. So that's across the Bronx River, the present-day Bronx River, anyway. And then he purchased the Crawford Morris House and an 88-acre estate, which is present-day 60 Crane Road. So right up the street, the house right before the Village Hall. It's present-day 60 Crane Road. At that time, it was Old Orchard Road or the Old Road. He retired to Scarsdale in 1790. And he was also one of the largest slaveholders in Scarsdale. Jim Bolden spoke a lot about that last week. Talked about when Mary married William Popham, that he gave one of his enslaved people to her as part of, I don't know if dowry is the right word, but, and that we know from census records that Judge Morris was one of the largest slaveholders and one of the longest slaveholders in the area. Major William Popham, fun fact, never made it to the level of major. He was at captain level, and I guess major is next. But for some reason, he's been called Major William Popham. He was born in Ireland to an English family and moved to Newark, Delaware at the age of 9. There are records that say that he went to Princeton and lived in New Jersey, but he didn't. He studied law, became clerk of the court of the exchequer, which is basically the secretary of the treasurer. He was a friend of Washington, Hamilton, and Burr, all whom have been purported to be at his house, the Locusts, at some point. He married Mary Morris again in 1783, and he bought the farmland in Scarsdale and built what they refer to as the time as just the house. You can imagine tons of property. There's a house. No need to name it anything else. We know which one you're talking about. So Major William Popham's son, William Sherbrooke Popham, he was born and died at the Locusts. So the house was called the house until it was called the Locusts, which is what we refer to it now. And there's some pictures, and we'll talk about that also in a minute. But he was born and died in the Locusts. He married Elizabeth Hill, and then when he was widowed, he married his sister, Jane Hill. The Elizabeth Hill, they had children. He did not have any children with Jane Hill. He was the warden of our first vestry when the church was incorporated in 1849, and he served here for 36 years. His son, William Hill Popham, so that's a picture of William Sherbrooke. I wish I could find a picture of William Hill Popham, but I couldn't. I could find many pictures of his gravestone, but sadly, I'd love to know what his face looked like. And maybe as things continue to be digitized in this day and age, we'll find one. If any of you find one, let me know. He's the great-grandson of Richard Morris, grandson of William Popham, oldest son of William Sherbrooke. He lived in the Crawford Morris house. So he moved in when, how is this? Are they supposed to hear it? Can you hear me any better? Sorry, okay.
Okay, good. Taking this. I'm so sorry.
Hot mics everywhere. Okay. So when Richard Morris passed away, the land came into the Popham's family. William Hill Popham, though, was the first one to move into the Crawford Morris house, the one that's 60 Crane Road, right up the street. It was also William Hill that deeded the 3 acres of land for St. James. He served on the vestry for 28 years, eventually becoming the warden. And the 2 windows right here, the closest ones to us on this side, they were given in memory of him and his wife in the 1890s. So here's the Locusts. It's present day 1015 Post Road, also known as 8 Sharon Lane. Just a side note, no one really cares, but when we moved to Scarsdale, this house was on the market, and so we went and looked at it, and it's so cool. I don't know if anyone else has been in it, but you open the front door, and you're immediately like, I am on a history tour. Like, this is just very cool. This picture shows, this is from the Scarsdale Historical Society. This is from 1880, and this is Mrs. William Popham here with her granddaughters, and then Louis C. Popham and his son, one of the Flemings, are over there. So it says 4 generations of Pophams lived in this house. This is a more present day, I think that's from 2017. Here we found in our parish register here, this note about in 1848, this was the part that I thought was most interesting, is talking about William Sherbrooke's family and talking about how Sunday school was started at the family's home in 1884. So a year before we were incorporated, a year before we had our first church services, it seems that we had Sunday school. So to me, it seems like that was the genesis of this all. The Crawford Morris house, so this is 60 Crane Road today. This again is from one of the amazing books that we have in our historical section of the Scarsdale Library. And this just talks about, for a long time, obviously, we were in White Plains, where we were worshiping, and then in 1849, We first held services in a farmhouse, being Chief Morris's house. So this house was where one of the first services for St. James the Less was occurred. And then they continued to do this sort of traveling minister for another 6 months before we decided to make something more permanent. So here's the letter of incorporation. So this Jim Bolden showed to me last week. This is in the Library of Congress that we found in DC. That has a copy of when we were incorporated on September 3rd. It lists the vestrymen and the senior wardens. This is the copy of it in our vestry notes. And it notes over there that our wardens were Mark Spencer and William S. Popham. I can't find anything on Mark Spencer, so a call out to everyone. If you have any information on or found any information on him, I would love to know it. William Popham, as we just discussed who he is, also in our annual town meeting notes for the town of Scarsdale. He's also noted as the County of Westchester Overseer of the Highway for the Southern District of Westchester. So more than one hat he wore. Let's see who else. Charles W. Palmer. He was elected treasurer of the vestry. He also lived and built the house that is now Trinity Church, right over here on the corner. He married one of the Pophams as well. We know William H. Francis McFarland, God bless him, couldn't find anything on him, or Joshua Underhill. Edmund Ludlow, let's see, where is he? He was a friend or a colleague of William Popham, and I think apropos for today, what I could find was in 1840, he was one of 14 dog owners in Scarsdale. So, lover of dogs. Maybe he was the one that first thought about bringing blessing of the pets here. I don't know. I made that up. Not the part that he had a dog, but I don't know his connection to the blessing of the pets. And then Bleecker, he was the clerk to the vestry, Leonard Bleecker, whose handwriting we were all going to become very familiar with shortly. Orrin Weed was a superintendent of common schools. He was later the constable and collector, and also another commissioner of the highway. Samuel Lyon, he was part of the buildings committee here at St. James. There's probably so much more to learn about these people. I was thinking, I'm on the vestry now. If someone Googled me, maybe that I gave this talk would come up, but that would be it. I'm sure there's much more to their lives and to their contributions. So here's our lease for the land, June 28, 1815. So this is a handwritten copy in our parish register that's upstairs in Mother Storm's office. And I just love the plot map, the actual plot map down there. And of course, I feel like we all know this, knowing that this is our anniversary year, that he leased 3 acres, 1 rod, 26 purchase for 1,000 years, terms of which were descendant of the Popham family would be paid 1 silver dime when requested, as long as religious services performed as prescribed in the Book of Common Prayer. Also in this lease is that the family of the Pophams and their heirs can't try and come back and litigate and take this land from us too. That was kind of nice that they put it there. Because what a beautiful spot it is. So here's some of our first vestry minutes, and I apologize, they don't look like as beautifully dated and that sepia tone on this as they do on my computer, but and major thanks to Philip Martin, who digitized all of these for us. Russell, who's giving the lecture next month. We're very familiar. But I thought this was just pretty cool. So this the first thing in the vestry notes selected a site on William Popham's farm for the church. They decided to go into a contract with Upton for all masonry work and to build to Frank Willis's specifications. And there's also a payment schedule. And they also note that the cornerstone was laid about a month prior. The second one, the plea for church edifice by Frank Willis was adopted, and the formal buildings committee was formed for the first time, at which point we'd love anyone to join the buildings committee. If you're interested, please see us after. And Karma was elected treasurer as well. So a busy sort of first week here in July, 2 back-to-back vestry meetings. And then in, or 3, I guess, towards the end, they call Reverend J.F. LeBaron to the rectorship, and he accepts on the spot in person. They also elect Augustus Bleeker to the clerk of the vestry. And I know Tony has been the clerk of the vestry. Has anyone else been the clerk of the vestry here? I have. It's such an important role. Without him, we wouldn't have any of this. So I think it's very cool. So we started to build the church after this. We've got the land, we have our architect, and the building was American Gothic. It's architect Frank Wills, who was inspired by the first church of this style and another St. James the Less in Philadelphia. Our church is technically, I think that looks so much like St. James. Our church is technically the second religious structure in Scarsdale, the Society of Friends Meeting House being the first. And then here's our now favorite and most familiar Whistler drawing. And this is the other picture is sort of date unknown, but hopefully around from that time as well. This is what the church looked like. The stone was taken from the churchyard itself, except for some Tuckahoe marble for the cut work around the windows and the doors. And the original church structure that we see here was just the nave behind us. So none of this existed in 1850. The original entrance to the church property was over there, the south lane door. And what would happen is you bring your buggy up our exit, and you'd come in front, you'd be dropped off, and then you go around the back of the church, and there was a horse barn on this side over by Old Orchard Road, where people would park. Well, something I found last night, I went to a deep wormhole in Whistler's mother's correspondence letters, and I found this one part where she writes, in 1853, the circle, she has so many, you should read these if you're interested, they're very cool. She has so many nicknames and little pet names for all of her friends, Mr. P and Lizzie, and it's very cute. And interesting. But she says, the circle here, as you saw them in health, going about doing good, Mrs. Popham throws open her parlors to the ladies' sewing circle. Already they have realized from quilting and more than $100. They are pledged for half the cost of the horse shed at $400, which is now being erected in the lower side of the church entrance. The plan is not to disfigure so useful provisions. A spacious room above the horse shed is to give an aspect of our library lattice as it does to this cottage. How delighted Mrs. P and her sisters will be to hear your coming. It's just very cute. And I also think very interesting. So in one of the books we do, as you guys know, that this church, the nave burned in 1882, or the church did. The walls were left standing and it was rebuilt. So we don't have much in terms of visuals of what the inside was before, but I did find a really long description of our church in a book from 1881. So prior to the fire, it was written down, and it's in great detail. The nave, which was 56 feet by 24 feet in the clear, with sittings for about 211, is divided into 4 bays, the flank walls of which were pierced with couplets. It's very ornate, it goes on and on. The chancel, 20 feet by 16 feet in the clear. When I was reading this, I was like, man, I wonder what that looked like. And then I thought, it's 2004, maybe ChatGPT can help me. So I did throw it into ChatGPT and asked it for a rendering. This was the first one it gave me, and I don't know. So I said, can you do it to scale? And then they sent back this one. I have no idea if they look anything like it, although the windows in the second one, and maybe it's just the angle of this, look more similar. But I thought that was kind of fun. So while we were building the church, we hear that Mrs. Popham has her sewing circle, that they're building funds. this letter that Jim Bolton also brought over, he has the original, is a letter from Popham, Lyons, and Ludlow to the rector and the vestry at Trinity Church in the city. And basically they're saying that we meant to say, we don't have enough money to finish the church. Can you we're short $15,000. It seems that they gave them $1,000. And this ledger over here, not exactly sure at what time this is the snapshot of it, but we're also assuming that it's for the church and not for the rectory that was built later, just because of some of the line items here being the Trinity Church, $1,000. The bell, there's not a bell at the rectory, we have a bell here. So we're assuming that's what it is, but maybe a little bit more digging could be involved in that. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say about the insides. Oh, yes, so the church being, the cost was $5,000. So my good friend Google told me that in today's world, that would be $204,000, which we did a great job of raising multiple churches last year with the capital campaign. This church was consecrated on June 28th, 1851. By William Heathcote Delancey. It's fun when you can find information on somebody, so that's why this is nice, a big, nice slide, and I couldn't find a picture of William Hill Popham. But he was born in Amerenik, great-grandson of Caleb Heathcote, the first Lord of the Manor of Scarsdale. Caleb Heathcote was also one of the founders of Trinity Church and instrumental in establishing other churches in the area. So Reverend Delancey's sister married the novelist James Fenimore Cooper, who wrote The Spy and gave the name The Locusts to the house that the Pophams lived in. So it's all very tight in this circle. He was ordained in 1822. He was the first bishop elected the first bishop of the newly created Diocese of Western New York, and he remained in that position for 25 years, and he is the one that consecrated our church. So now we have a church, we have a building, and we get on to doing church-like things. So we have our first baptisms in 1850. The first 5 were officiated by Reverend LeBaron before the church was built. Imagine they were done in private homes or elsewhere. And then there's a little note here under this one that says this was the first baptism in the newly erected church, and it is Eliza Hill Popham, the daughter of William Hill and Sarah Popham, which is, I like that symmetry. He donated the land, he got the first baptism. The other note is on the next page of the baptism is the woman, Eliza, of slave parentage that Jim Bolton spoke about yesterday. And I've been trying to figure out who she is, not consecutively for 4 years, but I was tasked with this 4 years ago. And digging into Whistler's mother's letters, I think we may have identified her, which I think is pretty cool. But it's a May. We'll report back on that when we have more information. But it's kind of exciting, and we're excited. The burials. This was a really, obviously burials are not a happy occasion, but going through the burials, it's really heartbreaking to see how many are under the age of, 2, just in the first years, or many years. Here we are, almost half of the first burials in the first decade were children or infants. And it's interesting, once you start going through all these records, you start to see these different names pop up in places. This first sweet little 10-month-old here, I think his parents are one of the first communicants. We'll see his name later. Same with James Jarvis, who is the third person here buried in St. James, according to our records. He's one of the first communicants as well. So there we go. Our first wedding, on a happier note, was Alethea Popham, and she married Augustus Bleecker. this is the first wedding in the church. The notes here, there's 2 weddings on the same day, but this one was done in a private home. So that's why she still gets the billing for her first bride. Those pictures are taken from an article in 1901 from the Scarsdale Inquirer. And she, this is when she was younger, and then this is their golden anniversary in 1901. A picture of them, which they were here for, which is kind of cool. So they were also, so Bleecker, this is our vestryman who was the clerk of the vestry, and they were also happened to be first cousins, which makes the family tree interesting in terms of tracking down people. You're like, is this a new person? Is this the same person? So here are the first communicants. So at this time, communion was only given a few times a year, not like we have it every Sunday. And it's an interesting list of sort of who's who. I'll just point out, here's the first, the same last name as the first child that was buried in the churchyard. We have the Jarvises. This is James, who's the third one buried in the churchyard. I don't know if you guys can even read this from where you are, but it's pretty interesting. The top is Sarah Popham, the wife of William S. Popham. Jane Popham is next, the wife of William H. Margaret Hill, Sarah Hill are the next ones. They live at 4 Rectory Lane, current day Rectory Lane, which is called the Cottage. And this is a house that Popham built for his sisters. And it was a summer home. And this is where Anna McNeil Whistler spent her time. This is where she lived as well. Charles Palmer married Mary Morris Popham, the daughter of William H. Popham. She's on there. Those are the ones that live in the Crane Corner House, now Trinity Church. Augustus Bleecker and Alethea are noted here. It's once you start researching this, you're kind of like, oh, I know those people. These are my friends. I've seen their name before. Let me figure out who it is. And they become much more familiar. So this is kind of a cool page. Here's Isabella Johnson that Jim Bolden spoke about on last Sunday as well. And this is such a great map that, not necessarily drawn to scale, but that Louise Clark had done for the book, her book. And this has all the vestrymen's houses. So we've got the church, we've got the actual rectory, we've got downtown Scarsdale, we've got Weed and Lyons and Underhills, all their homes plotted on this. If you haven't seen Louise's book, you should absolutely find this. This picture is also on the Scarsdale Historical Society website, if you want to zoom in and see some more. The first confirmation, a pretty healthy class of 16 or so people. According to the Scarsdale Inquirer, Mary Hill Palmer was the first one to be confirmed in this group. Again, she's the daughter of Palmer on the vestry, who is also the one who lived in the present day Trinity Church. Our church offerings, so we're thinking about our annual appeal and our pledge and plate on our line item for our budget. The first year they had $190, and then in the next following years got it up to $360, and it remained about $300 for the next few years. Interesting, there's line items there for buying the Book of Common Prayer, Bibles. So just fascinating what the offerings were. The first rectors were Reverend James F. LeBaron, and we don't know much about him except that he accepted the rectorship immediately and then resigned. This is his letter of resignation a year later. I'm sure there was wonderful things in between, but this is all that we have documented as of today. And then the second rector, who served for 20 years, William Whittingham Olson, he was only 24 when he was called to the rectorship here. And he accepted for a salary of annual salary of $250 in a house. I'm not going to go too far into him, but there's so much interesting information. His daughter wrote his daughter wrote a diary basically, and that's what Jim Bolden published, which is her memories and accounts of her family and their history in this area. Talks about, she grew up in the rectory on Rectory Lane, number 11 Rectory Lane. And there are just some fascinating stories that she talks about, and sort of, it gives you a good glimpse at what the day in the life would have been of someone in Scarsdale, but also members of this church, talking about opening up the parsonage and having everyone over for Christmas and decorating the tree, like the community, the parish over, not just the Olson family. Emily Olson, his daughter, is the one that married the Bleecker family, and that's how the Pophams, the Bleeckers, the Olsons, the Hills are all joined now. The last thing I'll leave you guys with is I found this in a document online that was talking about the history of St. James. I don't know who wrote it. I think it was, they say that it was from 1925, but in speaking about history, it's a lot of facts and dates and just sort of cold statistics, if you will. And I just loved what they said about this, and I thought it was such a good quote to end on. One cannot state the spiritual history of a parish, but it seems evident that it is still in the making, that the good deeds and prayers and missionary gifts of the past will inspire the parish to greater good works in the future, all done in the name of our leader, Jesus Christ. So I just thought that was such a great and important note to all of this history that we're talking about, is that there's no way to write down how much this place means spiritually, or it meant to these people spiritually, or this time to this town spiritually, except I guess for the example that we're still here. But it's just something that I like to keep in mind while scrolling through all these documents. And I thought it was really, really wonderful. Thank you for attending, and thank you to so many people who made this possible. A lot of help from people who are no longer with us and still with us, and also afar. And a huge thank you to Louise Clark and all the work that she did writing her book. With all that framework, I don't know how far any of us would have gotten in trying to tackle this time at this time in our church's history. So I'm happy to answer any questions if I know the answer. You're welcome to ask, and I'll look it up if I don't. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Will this then be the website?
Will this be on the church's
Yeah,
website?
so it would be great. If you don't mind, I'll get your slideshow. I have a recording, we'll make sure we can hear you, it's screening now. We'll figure out a way to get this and the slideshow.
Yeah, I just put it up with that.
Yeah.
And
Totally with the audience.
it's just curious, and if you don't know. During the time of the Revolution, how did the church as it was change in terms of the content of worship? You know?
That's a great question.
Well,
Oh, yeah. That's our, Russell, are you tackling that? The question was, how did the church change during the Revolution?
I thought
it's
it
gonna
was
come up with the World War II, and World War I, and then pandemic. So we'll go a little bit through that, but it changed because a lot of the men went to fight, and so the women played a very integral role in the time that was going on. So we'll go through that, but it didn't impact the church a lot because the women had to step up and do a lot while the men were.
And then I think the next lectures are also going to do during the Civil War. And Russell's going to talk about.
The monarch is head of the church. So the king or queen has to
That's really what our.
It's a fascinating history of Christ Church in Philadelphia, where they, between the time, we one for the next Sunday service, a lot of bishops gathered together and they had to, among other things, rewrite the prayers of people, take the chain out, they had to authorize all this, and so there was like a security of 10 feet, and it's all in Philadelphia. At Christ Church, and you can read about that. I mean, we don't get into it as much because our history started later here at St. James. But it is still people here. But there were people worshiping,
Until
with the clergy from Rye, and but Philadelphia was kind of the epicenter of that debate. Like, oh my gosh, we just lost the road to church, and it's interesting.
Because there's such actually such a little period between the Declaration.
Yeah.
The surrender.
Yeah.
In 1883.
Yeah, I don't know what that week was that was so intense, but you can look it up, and it's interesting when you're interested in that. Yeah, some church were that, they had decided to go to stay.
It was something a few years ago about this. As the economy was something, but a lot of the kids said, yeah, I put this boat out. Otherwise, they can figure out it's treason. We can call it treason. Yes.
Yeah.
Wasn't that part of the reason that he became a Episcopalian was because of the separation from the church and church being the right.
Yeah.
When we started to have women priests, the Episcopalians, the Anglican priests, went to the Anglican, the local Anglican churches here in America. I had a friend who left the Episcopal church in Connecticut, started going to an Anglican church in Connecticut because she disagreed with them.
Well, it's interesting that you said that because one of my husband's favorite trivia questions is whether or not there are any married Catholic priests. And the answer was yes, because they were Anglican or Episcopalian priests that left. And then the bishops that gay priests left. And so they left and moved to Catholic church. So it's so interesting to see within obviously the old churches, but we have churches as well, the old Catholics that left when Act 2 started, and you have, so everyone they like what they believe, and then those things evolve. So they go one way, some go another, and it's interesting where we all end up. It's nice to know there's a place for everyone.
Back to the, no. Oh, have you researched the area back to the land pattern? Have not.
Bolden mentioned that last week, right? It was given this land by the Jewish king. Remember we mentioned that last week to the north. So, and it would be extended quite wait, so was it first? With that.
I can't remember. We can look that up. I will.
I would be curious to see the difference of the documents, because I have to do that in the United States, and I'm curious to see the time frame when that was actually produced. Because before we had our wars, our revolutionary war, and the Civil War, the government was giving out land to citizens to fight. They were giving land back. A lot of people don't know about land back because that's like the king and queen of all land documents, warrant deeds, land deeds, because the stipulations in the writing of deeds to be is correct. So it passes down to generations, correct? If you get a hold of that document.
I can't, but we'll look into that. That'll be fascinating. We can check with Jim as well. That would be interesting. So in the lease, somebody else's probably actually. In the lease, it does say that if we give them the silver dime if requested, and if it's not requested by another feast, and I wish I had the feast of whom in my head, then we are no longer at least obligated to pay the rent. So I don't know if I don't know, we've got some lawyers in the room. Jim, what do you think? Are we done? We'll pay when not, but no. Yeah.
You had the lease, okay, where is it?
So this copy of the lease is upstairs in the parish messenger, or the parish register. Where's the lease? And this is just the first page of about 4. And then this is the last page. So it's upstairs in those cool books that are crumbling.
You're not the giant ones anymore, they're a little smaller, but so that's the yeah, and that's the practice.
Yeah.
Ancestral natural, you know, like in the Bible, it says, David begot this, who begot that, you know, and that lineage coming right down to, I think, appointed sinner. Do we have that?
We don't have that anywhere. That would be an interesting project to do. Jim Bolden brought over this, I don't know if any of you follow the Historical Society on Instagram, but they posted showing it to Astrid and myself. He has this, I thought it was so cool. And in the back of the video, I go, holy smokes, like I was just blown away by it. But it's this huge document that folds out in multiple ways, handwritten, just of the Popham family, starting with Major Popham and Mary Morris's marriage and going from then to 1910. It is, I hope that the Scarsdale Society is going to preserve it. They've taken it from him, and I hope that they'll have it somehow so that other people can access it. It is absolutely fascinating. I have a picture on my phone that I could show you. I didn't put it in the doc in the slides because it just wouldn't be legible. But it's incredible. It's the one we saw last week, handwritten, and it's enormous. I felt a little bit like A Beautiful Mind trying to do this because I was like, you're connected to you. And you're gonna, it was, the names are repeated as we do naming children after other people in your family, close friends. It would be a really fascinating project to do that. I'll put that on the to-do list.
Oh, that's great. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Please, when I'm also praying, we'll do the next section. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
Take back my swap.
That was so like fun, but also like driving me crazy because there is so much. You can go down all the different roads and really get to know one thing. Cedar Bar. Yeah, I have actually I took it sorry.
And if you take your laptop, because what are the difficulty connecting to the screen, but you screen share and then you hear. See that would after a while, we'll try to figure it out. Yeah, I don't know if we're not here, you'll know how to connect, because we have to test it out today.
It's not tall. Maybe.
Yes, there is, but this is just a copy of what I took pictures of the parish register. So this goes through. So these are I mentioned 1850 and because these are the burial like that burial records. So this one has all the parishes we have. So for the occupancy has 4 burials.
Can you send me your presentation?
And then I also took pictures of things that are really that are like this 1860s, like past my time, that I'll share with you. And like there's also this is so interesting. This is just this is 50 agreement. This is the Stone.
And we might need to store it.
So, because I think they stopped writing them down and started sending around their agreement. And then those got lost. So they, I mean, there's a period of some time that it was at least set up. Maybe in the 2000s. It's the research.
Copies originated from some. I wonder if he had to. There's no way he was.
No, but you typing them out in real time, right? You were an email, like there's probably a draft that he's writing.
Well, then I guess the Secretary of Industry.
Yeah.
It should be somewhere.
Well,
Maybe you want it.
no, is that what it's
In the library, public library, in the And you can't check it out, but I just told them to go to the no, it's you're like getting it like research based. But in between soccer games and blessing of the pets, I have like these document pictures. But here's this is the one that pulled in. So that's where I got that picture. So it's and he has great footnotes about everything, like the rectory, which I should have said. Reverend, what's the term? Oh, New York lady.
I think I saw it, but I didn't.
It's got a green. But she talked about Spartanville